recording and start the stream. Welcome to Horsin Around in the year of our Lord 2021. I am your host, Nicholas Mercadante, and with me today I have three lovely new generation guests. If you would like to introduce yourselves.
Hi, I'm Christian Beekman, more commonly known as Beekman.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, Hi, I'm Jacob, and I'm more commonly known as Beekman.
Oh yeah.
Whoa,
Okay.
we're gonna have to. This is gonna get confusing. We're gonna have to figure this out.
Hi, I'm Nicole, and I don't have a nickname. There are no real fun nicknames for Nicole.
I think there's an opening for the Beekman nickname though. I think you might be able to slide in with that one.
You think we should do the podcast with three Beekmans?
Yeah, one Nick and three Beekmans. Somehow you can turn that into a name for a new show.
3.5 Beekmans.
Yeah.
Wow, that's a lot of
Why am I only
value
half
for being
a
to Nick to
Beekman?
being half a Beekman.
Yeah, I don't know if I should be insulted because Nick is half of me.
Jesus Christ. Anyways,
more or less equal to half of you.
welcome.
Remember,
back.
you're on his podcast.
Welcome back. It's been a few weeks since we went off the air for the holidays. Now we're back, and couldn't even make it through 1 week of the new year without everything getting set on fire. So I was kind of worried that we wouldn't have much to talk about except for what people did over break, but don't have to worry about that anymore because some things happened and events occurred, as our president to be ejected would probably like to say in his now deleted Twitter. But do you guys want to talk about something else before we dive into that? Like, do you guys want to talk about if you did anything over the holidays, or,
Yeah,
or do we
I
just
told you,
dive
55 minutes of Spotify Wrapped. That's what I
We
want.
can talk about, our country imploding, but really, that pales in comparison to the importance of Spotify Wrapped, which was released at the beginning of December.
Look,
Yeah.
I just didn't get a chance to talk about it before. I only did 2 episodes before break, and one of them was just devoted to fucking Mandalorian, and then I don't know, the other one we just didn't get around to talking about Spotify. But I think for me, that, just to quickly touch on it, I think over the years it has gotten more. I used to listen to playlists when I was trying to get to sleep, or if I was doing a gaming session, and I would just leave that on in the background, and so that would just become my Spotify Wrapped, and I felt like it wasn't really an accurate portrayal of the shit that I'd actually liked and discovered from that year, because it was mostly just butt rock or fucking chill hop stuff that I played when I was falling to sleep. But over time, I've stopped doing both of those things, so I think it's gotten better now. I don't know.
Dude, getting a job is what... Getting an office job is what, changed my Spotify Wrapped. I remember last year, after having, 1 year of being in an office, and I think I, listened to 10 times as much Spotify that year.
Oh, yeah.
And I wish that was a joke, but I think if I looked back at the stats, it would actually be 10 times as much. Where I was like, oh, damn, when I sit in a cubicle for 8 hours a day, I'm usually spending 8 of those 8 hours listening to something on Spotify.
Right, yeah. As opposed to when you're in school, you can't really be listening to music while you're in class, so, it's just a lot more time to be fucking around. But yeah, I guess I could quickly pull up if there's any specific artists or songs that you really enjoyed from the previous year that you want to shout out. I could just quickly throw up I've been doing this thing where I make a playlist of the top. I as I'm adding songs from Discover Weekly and stuff, I'll if it really sounds good to me, I'll add it to a playlist of top 10 finds of 2020 or X year contenders, and at the end of the year I'll try to cull it down to the top 10, and so these are the ones that I ended up with that I'm showing on stream now. Billy Strings, fucking fantastic. Was introduced to them over spring break and love them so much. Joji was also a standout. His album was really good. And I think all of these are worth taking a listen to. They're definitely, I think this year in particular, I want to be able to look back at these in like a decade or so and be able to see like how my taste in music has evolved over like a decade or so, which I think is like an interesting feature of this.
Yeah.
Because I can see in previous years, like I think in 2017 or 2018, I got like really into lo-fi, and so a lot of my or at least a couple of my top picks from that year were like lo-fi related. And that was just something I wasn't listening to before that point. So this year was definitely very all over the place.
Sort of related to Spotify Rap thing. Around the same time that was coming out, there's that web app link people were posting out which had that out thing that next.
Oh yeah.
I just pulled that up because I was like, oh shit, we gotta talk about this.
Yeah, that
was
was great.
wondering where people were getting those from. I thought it was just a lot of people who figured out how to Photoshop them in the same way.
A really complex meme format.
Yeah.
What was the
yeah,
what was the
but
website called?
I don't remember.
I have a website called pudding.cool at the top of my screenshot, so that might be it. But I think you can just look up like Spotify roast bot or whatever.
Yeah, music roast, and because a billion media websites wrote articles
How
about
bad is your Spotify the pudding?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so it was interesting because it was more of just like a look at the last time I used Spotify, which was like in 2012. So it's like, oh, what do you listen to? A lot of churches and pro wrestling theme. Well, you know, that checks out.
Well, that's what's crazy is like it checks your entire Spotify history, not just your recent Spotify history. So it'll be like, you listen to a lot of The Doors, and I was like, yeah, in like 2016.
Were you
just trying to break on through the other side?
Playing them?
Sure.
I don't want this app to bring up like my music listening history from like 2017 when I was listening to a lot of Lana Del Rey and being sad.
Oh, it will. It will definitely pick that up.
Yeah, it's definitely.
Yeah, I'm rerunning mine right now. It was pretty bad, but like I knew what was coming, and I've accepted it. You know, you like what you like, and you can get roasted for it, but like.
Well, the best part about the roast is it was actually a pretty well designed bot because I was like, you know what? Yeah, this is kind of true.
Yeah, it was pretty good. I guess for me, for standout music, I'm trying to. Brain is an addled mess over the last year time span for obvious reasons. I really liked the Bring Me the Horizon EP that came out towards the end, like in October of last year.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not necessarily a huge fan of that band specifically, but I'm like, oh, this kind of slaps.
Yeah, the fucking Parasite Eve single that they dropped early on, I was like, very hardcore vibing.
Yeah, so I'll be interested to see if they take that direction forward into the next full studio album. But I really enjoyed. I think that would be a standout I would highlight.
Isn't there didn't they was part of that album the song that they did for Death Stranding, the Luden song or whatever it was? I know they did a song for
I'm gonna say I don't think so.
Death Stranding, but
Death Stranding came out in 2019, so and I think the Parasite Eve was the first thing released off of that. So So it might have been some other project they did because they put out like a couple EPs before or something. I think I don't know. I don't know when music comes out. I just find it and it's like, oh, okay, this is cool.
I feel like what was interesting about the rap this year was I found a lot of stuff showing up in my rap that I hadn't listened to since like before the pandemic, and I had forgotten.
Yeah.
Yes, a hard divider.
For me, I used to listen to a lot of music, particularly like sophomore, junior year of college, because I had a lot of classes that were on different campuses, so I spent all day on a bus. So because of that, I started listening to music a lot. And that decreased just by virtue of me being able to either walk or drive to a lot of my classes pretty easily. And the other source of music that I had was like, I'm a competitive swing dancer, so whenever I would go to events, I would get to hear new stuff, and all that's shut down now. So I just got really sad listening to a lot of my old playlists because it was just kind of like, here are all the people, reminds you of all the people you can't see right now. And then I got a concussion, So I got
Ooh,
really into listening to
that sucks.
podcasts this year. So my Spotify Wrapped is like stuff that I was listening to a lot in February and podcasts.
Podcasts.
What podcasts have you been listening to?
My all-time favorite anything right now is a podcast called Dungeons and Daddies, which is a D&D podcast where instead of having like a traditional kind of you meet in a tavern to go on a quest setup, it's about 4 dads from our world who are transporting their kids to a soccer game and accidentally go through a portal to another world, and they wake up and their kids are gone. So they have to go on this quest to find them and figure out who took them in the first place. And it is, I shit you not, the funniest thing I've listened to in a really long time. I started listening to it a lot when I was driving to work, and there were a couple of times where I was laughing so hard I almost had to pull over. And the other one I've been listening to a lot recently is My Brother and Me, which I know is a pretty popular one, which is supposed to be like the advice show for the modern era, where they just kind of, they have people submit questions, and they also go through a lot of Yahoo Answers posts and give completely unhelpful advice. It's very funny.
Yeah. Do you have you tried listening to their, because they have a D&D podcast as well, with the Adventure Zone. Have you heard of that? Or
I have. I actually listened to a couple of episodes of it initially when I'd caught up to where they'd left off in Dungeons and Daddies back in June, and I didn't really get into it. And I also tried listening to My Brother and Me around the same time, and I also didn't really get into it, but I tried listening to their advice podcast again recently, and I've been really liking it. So I think the Adventure Zone is something I'm going to go back to eventually. It's just like, they've been running both of those for so long.
Yeah.
I don't know how I'm probably ever going to finish them.
I think the nice thing about how they seem to structure, and I'm in the same boat. I started listening to the Adventure Zone like way back in, I don't know, 2018 or something, and I've been sort of off and on with it for like the past 2 years. And I haven't gotten to the end of, I think, what they sort of call their like first campaign or whatever. And like I think, as far as I can tell, they sort of do a thing where it's like all a connected universe, but after a certain point they'll end one story and then pick up a new one with like a new set of 3 characters. And so like they sort of compartmentalize these sort of mini campaigns. They're still long. Like they're still, I think the first one, I don't remember what they call it, but that one is like 60 to 70 episodes, which is an hour each. So it's still a hell of a lot of content per campaign, but like compare that to something like Critical Role, where they have 100 plus episodes, which are 4 hours plus each. Like,
yeah, I tried listening to Critical Role, and I kind of gave up during the first episode because I was like, this is so long, I can't commit to this.
Yeah.
Hot take. I think the podcast format is much better on D&D listening than the hour-long podcast formula works a lot better than Critical Role is like, all right, you're going to watch an entire session. You're not going to understand what's going on half the time, and you'll forget most of it by the end.
Well, I think theirs is built so much on like it being live streamed and having like you're on the Twitch chat and you're hanging out with these people, and then like it's more of like that sort of in the moment experience, whereas like less of an we recorded this play experience that you can listen to like after the fact.
Dimension 20 also has a really good D&D podcast. I started at the first campaign, and I'm only like 7 episodes in. I haven't listened to it in a while, but that's also really funny. And I like that they put it in high school. That's a clever take on it.
Fantasy High is very just good shit. Brian Lee Mulligan, fantastic DM, just like really chill, and seems like a fun guy to be around. I don't know.
Yeah.
Well, that's sorry to jump in, Beekman, if you're going to say something.
No, go ahead. I just have a recommendation to give after this.
Fantasy High is the kind of stuff where I'm like, this is the type of, like, I have a hard time listening to D&D podcasts for a lot of different reasons, but something I can't get into is when, like, I like things being a little bit more scuffed, if that makes sense.
Yeah. A little bit more, not so like high not as high fantasy or like not as trying like doing all these numbers calculations and like trying to follow the rules to a T and stuff like that.
Or even like not taking the like D&D itself that seriously. I don't know. There was always a weird thing about Critical Role that I couldn't get into, where I was like, all these people are a little bit too into this.
Yeah, I think you would really like Dungeons and Daddies then. One thing that I really appreciated.
I watched I listened to Dungeons and Daddies. I just dropped off in like March around pandemic time, but yeah.
You have to catch up. The most recent episode made me cry.
I think I had enough crying in Dungeons and Daddies when they went to the fucking Mummy, the roller coaster ride, and I was like,
God, don't spoil anything.
And you get to the end, and you're like,
don't spoil anything.
It's not a spoiler. I'm just saying I got really emotional on the Mummy ride.
You haven't seen nothing yet. That's only like maybe top 5.
Like
it gets worse.
It's understandable when you go to the Mummy ride. It is a roller coaster in more regards than one.
It's a haranguing, very emotional experience. The one thing I really appreciate from listening to Dungeons and Daddies, as someone who is now in a second D&D campaign after not playing it for a couple of years, it has made me realize that and appreciate like committing to your character and role-playing as your character at even if it's like sacrificing actually accomplishing things and being I guess helpful.
Yeah,
because that was something that I had an issue with the last time I was playing this, where my character was supposed to be chaotic neutral, but I was surrounded by not just like other characters who were chaotic, but just people who were chaotic that were just like doing whatever the hell they wanted, and I just kind of turned into normal, lawful, good stuff. Guys, please, we need to get this done.
Yeah. I had a friend of mine way back in high school who was like talking about maybe doing like a D&D campaign. It didn't come to fruition, but he was saying like for beginner DMs, he was like, yeah, you should probably just like tell your players to just cross off like the chaotic and the evil part of the alignment charts, because like I
think that's a conversation you have to have at the start when you're forming a game. Like the GM and the players got to sit down and say like, okay, what are we doing? Like, what is really the intent here?
What do the players want? And like, what does the DM want? And like, how do you make it have a medium there?
I think that's all. Like on the topic of DM and still wrapping it into the D&D podcast thing. That's also something I've come to appreciate. Is as a DM myself, I tend to like things a little bit more loosey-goosey. I mean, Nick, you kind of know this, where I'm like, you know what, things definitely didn't go as planned. I'm going to now ad-lib the rest of this session.
Which is great. It's fun that way. Like fucking what the thing when the last time you were DMing the campaign that I was in, we got to that town and the last thing I remember is that there was a pirate ghost that was somebody
Nick,
that we knew from before somehow.
That you spent all your money at the starting town getting swindled because someone convinced you that this trinket was worth a lot of money. And you gave them all your gold, and I was like, all right, Nick, out of character, this trinket does nothing. But suddenly, while we were playing, every character who picked up that trinket from you would die.
Yes! Because my first character died. And then...
your first character died. Well, your first character died because I gave you an out, and I was like, Nick, you're going to get yourself killed. This is your only chance. And you're like, I'm going to still do this. If I die, give me my second chance. And I gave you your second chance. And then the first common encounter, you fucking die again.
Yep.
And then I think we were playing with Nando. So Nando picked up the trinket from you.
Yep.
And then he died. Yep. And then the joke was that the useless trinket was actually cursed the entire time. Then there was
useful for one thing, killing player characters.
Oh yeah.
It was 100% effective too. We would make a joke like every session. We'd be like, well, I wonder who's gonna die this time. But it's weird. I like being that DM, but I like listening to the exact opposite type of DM, if that makes sense. Like the reason I appreciate Dungeons and Daddies and this other one that I like, which is like a Star Wars tabletop podcast, is because both of those groups have a very controlled narrative. Mm-hmm. Like they still have like roles and stuff, and there's still some improvisation, but like at the end of the day, they can like the DM has something very specific set in mind for everything to happen, and he's going to push everyone with as much force required to get to those
a little gentle railroading, just a tad, just a touch.
Yeah. I do love it whenever they manage to derail Anthony, like the time that he had that whole complicated like arena fight set up, and then they were like, now we're gonna get naked. He was like,
well, that's what makes it almost more fun in those situations where, like, if it's just a pure improv D&D podcast, and I'm kind of like, all right, well, everyone's improving, like, it just happens.
Yeah, but everyone's in on it. But if you have players who are like, man, I'm trying to get invested in the story here, and this person's like, I'm just gonna set shit on fire because that's cool. And it's like,
that's, at least 2 people in my current campaign. The last time we met, I think I spent the entire session just like helping a bartender in a tavern because part of my backstory was like I used to work in a tavern and I was upset about everyone who kept trying to start a fight in there. So I was like, people were flipping over tables and I just kept setting the tables back up. And then somebody made me go into rage mode and then I cleaved them in half and I was like, oh shit. And I just started cleaning the floor and that's where we left it.
Yeah, that's D&D. That's D&D, baby.
Yeah. That Star Wars podcast is called Echoes of Eternity. It's run by a bunch of like, I don't want to say old school YouTubers, but like if you know Jesse Cox and like Strippin and like all these people from like the Total Biscuit days of YouTube, then like, yeah, it's like that crew.
Gotcha. Yeah.
I don't know. It's pretty good.
On the subject of role-playing game podcasts, one I can recommend is one called Friends at the Table, which is run by a bunch of people who've been playing games off podcasts a long time together. And the GM is a guy named Austin Walker, who's a games critic and he's a smart dude, but he's really quite talented at the game master role. And I think his stuff is instructive about like the useful kinds of questions you can ask your players as a GM and like world building, and it's interesting because the games they run are sort of kind of more indie role playing games rather than Dungeons and Dragons, which it's the popular one. It's what people think of when you say tabletop role playing or they D20s. They're like, oh, like D&D, and they've got a bunch of interesting stuff across a lot of genres. Like they did a fantasy arc, but they've done several different sci-fi shows of different flavors in these sort of unique settings. So I would definitely give that one a listen. And it's more towards the sort of like structured listen rather than like the big session. And they also have bonus stuff, because they have a Patreon and stuff like that. They have bonus stuff where you can they record their like character generation settings, which sessions, which can be pretty instructive and interesting to listen to. So and the reason I wanted to bring him up is because we were talking about podcasts in general, and Austin Walker hosts another podcast I like called A More Civilized Age, which is a Star Wars podcast where they are going back and looking at the sort of, mainly they're going to go through the Clone Wars era, but to do that, so they watched episode 1, episode 2, and now they're going to watch the entire run of the Clone Wars television show, and then watch Revenge of the Sith at the end. So it's gonna be like
exhausting.
Yeah, but it's interesting because it's a mix of people who are big, like what you would call, sort of fairly involved with their Star Wars fandom, and then people who have like seen the Star Wars movies but are perhaps like less.
Yeah.
So you get a lot of interesting points, and they just interestingly like try and like grapple with the prequels, and that it's not just like an hour and 90 minutes of them like, the prequels were bad. It's like they try and like there's some interesting ideas in those movies, and there's like some interesting choices that were made, and did they execute it well? No, not really. But like compared to some other Star Wars movies you could name, there are perhaps some interesting ideas rather than no ideas.
Yeah. Like.
Thanks for putting this on, because I've been recommended this podcast in Spotify so many times.
It's very good. It's very good.
Yeah. Sorry to jump in, but Beekman's story just reminded me of like that's like old Blank Check, like classic shit, where Blank Check used to be a Star Wars podcast.
Yes.
And they did the same thing where they went through not the Clone Wars episodes, but they went through each of the prequels, and were like, they would talk about all this stuff, but they also had a bit going where they only knew the movie they were watching existed. So the joke would be at the end of the episode, they'd be like, yeah, it's so crazy that they never made another one of these. And then someone would be like, wait, I just found this movie called Star Wars Episode 2. What? Oh my God. And then the next episode would be about them discovering Star Wars Episode 2. And it's all that kind of stuff where I'm like, I very much appreciate when people go back and they're like, look, the prequels didn't work, but like you can't just write movies off because they didn't work as the whole. You gotta
and they talk about how like Attack of the Clones is probably the worst of the prequel movies.
Yeah, agreed.
But like, I mean, it spawned so much cool stuff from it though. Like all the cool, like there's so many, like it was all the great Star Wars video games that came out of it, and sort of expanded universe fiction. Like all that stuff was great, but it's just like the core thing that it was supposed to be, that all that stuff was built around was not. So
I like Attack of the Clones. I have a lot of fond memories of watching that. Because that was the one that was like on TV the most when I was growing up. So that was the one out of all the prequels that I like very firmly latched onto. And I also liked, was it Geonosis? No, it wasn't Geonosis. Whatever the planet they were on at the end, where they're like
Geonosis. You're right. That's Geonosis. Yeah.
All right, where they're in the arena and they're like, all right, we're gonna have you fight all of these weird bug monsters. I was like, hell yes. Because one thing I really, really appreciate about the Star Wars movies, completely outside of the plot, was just like
creature design.
All of the different creature designs they had. And I thought that the CGI for a lot of them in the prequels worked pretty well. Yeah. Just don't CGI Yoda.
Don't CGI Yoda.
I mean, I had a long conversation about how like the merchandising side of Star Wars has like failed on remembering that. Like, hey, we have all this cool, weird shit. Yeah. Make more stuff with the cool, weird shit.
Stop making all the fucking fit and post shit. Give me some cool-ass aliens. Give me the fucking little dude that operated on C-3PO in Rise of Skywalker, okay? I need that little guy.
Yeah, dude. I love that little goblin man who puts the coins and BB-8.
Give me Neon Numb from Return of the Jedi, who's Lando Calrissian's co-pilot in the Millennium Falcon during the attack on the second Death Star. Give me that.
He's in The Last Jedi. I was watching Red Letter Media's Last Jedi review, and like they just drop. He's like he's part of the crew that's like with Laura Dern and everybody else, but he's just like, oh no, we're screwed or whatever. Like they don't do anything with him, just like they don't do anything with Akbar. It's just like,
I mean, look, counterpoint, that's fine. I don't care. They tried doing that stuff in episode 9 and I cringe every second it happens.
Yeah. But it's interesting. Nicole brings up Yoda. In the first episode of this podcast, they talk about like there's a really good behind the scenes documentary about the making of episode 1. And it's just sort of very interesting to see the process. And like there's a part where like talking to Frank Oz, who's the puppeteer who did Yoda and all this stuff and a bunch of puppet stuff. And they said, and they're talking about, they're showing off the new 3D animated Yoda. And he's talking and Frank's just kind of like forlornly says, "You're not going to need me anymore." And then George Lucas says, "Whoa, we're always going to need you, Frank." They didn't use Frank in Attack of the Clones. And you're just like, and it's just like, the sort of obsession.
He is still a puppet in episode 1, right? Because he's just sitting in the chair. For this
puppet in some, I think a lot of it is.
Because like
there's a great deal of it that's CGI.
Like he doesn't start doing flips and shit until episode 2.
No, he does not start. It's like
he just looked cursed in episode 1.
Yeah. And there was also Yaddle, which together they made Yoda's bastard.
That didn't happen. That's not.
You know that Yoda fucks. That's just how it is.
No.
I'm sorry.
No. Yoda is ball sack, like all Jedi.
That is
except not really.
Having the Jedi be like kind of a monastic order that don't allow for like sex made zero sense to me. I know we try to forget about the midichlorian thing, but even setting aside that, like,
and that's what this podcast gets into.
And they were both They were two of the most powerful Jedi ever. Clearly, there's some sort of heritable component. They should all be smashing for the good of the Jedi.
I mean,
you want more powerful Jedi, that's how you're gonna get it.
Like, wait, maybe if we could, have relationships, we wouldn't need to steal children from across the galaxy to impress into our religious order.
Yeah.
Like, I feel like a lot of people forget. Like, I mean, I understand that when it came out, this is why people were mad at it. But like, episodes 1, 2, and 3 are like literally like, hey, here's the Jedi Order. You know those cool guys you thought were cool? Well, actually, they're a bunch of idiots.
Yeah. Also,
bad.
Like the entire original trilogy was just like, so the Jedi were like space wizards, and that's all you know about them. There used to be like a good amount of them. Now they're all gone. Obi-Wan just told Luke like the bare minimum, and yet Yoda taught him like a little bit more, and that's all you got. And then the prequels are like, oh, you want more Jedis? Oh, we'll give you more Jedi.
Well, because the prequel has to grapple with the idea of like, all right, what if there was a monastic order of people filled with people with the same ideology as Obi-Wan and Yoda Also, like, people forget, like, Obi-Wan and Yoda are like wrong. Like in episode 5, they're like, yeah, Luke's a fucking dunce and he'll never get this done. He's got emotions for other people. Fuck that shit. But like the point of episode 5 is like, nah, Luke did the right thing. He should have gone and saved his friends.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, exactly. And it's like, that's another thing. The podcast talks a lot about that questions, and that's why I recommend it. But it's like one thing they talk about, which I think is cool, is some of the best acting in The Phantom Menace is Anakin's mom. Like that scene when they are sitting at the dinner table and she's like looking at these two Jedi and like she knows these two guys are like fucking bad news for her and her kid. Like, yeah, she's like, I'm never gonna see my son. Like she knows. She doesn't need to be. She doesn't need to be a Jedi to see the future here about like what's going on. Like,
Remember the part of that movie where the freedom fighters were like, look, we understand that you're literally enslaved, but like your kid, he's got like magic powers, so we can only choose one. Sorry.
Also, Qui-Gon Jinn, who cheats at a dice game to like sway, so like he doesn't like it. He puts it like, oh, we need the boy and the mother, and then the Watto's like, I don't know, can't do it, can't take it. They go, Qui-Gon's like, yeah, all right, just the boy. Like, what the fuck? You were gonna cheat anyway. You're not gonna cheat for both of them. What the fuck, dude?
I wonder. Yeah, Jedi care about ending slavery or like freeing enslaved people, but only if it suits their purpose. I wonder if Anakin's mom recognized that she was basically selling her son into a different form of slavery that was only a little bit better.
Kind of, yeah.
Well, I think the other thing was, like, to look at it really cynically, like, it's another thing where you can't be having these attachments, and that's why literally everybody else in the Order was like, hey, you can't take Anakin in because he's so old and he's really attached to his fucking mom. And
because like if you take a 1-year-old or a 2-year-old baby, like they don't remember who their parents are. Right. Like they're not,
still
like,
fucked
it's
up.
Fucked
but
up
at least
still,
the baby's
but like
not
obviously,
gonna, And so then that
like,
and like
you're all upset at this 9-year-old because he misses his mom. I'm like, what
the fuck?
Well, yeah, of course.
Yeah, and like
come on, guys. You've been living in that temple in Coruscant for too long.
That might have been part of why Qui-Gon was okay with not taking his mom with the deal. Because then if he did bring the mom with him as well, then there's obviously no way that you're going to separate them, like, after that point. Obviously, it's still an issue because the kid's fucking 9 years old. You're taking him away from his mom, but, like, that might have been
These are the kind of questions they really talk about on this podcast, and so I highly recommend it if you like Star Wars or interested in Star Wars, give it a listen.
All I can say is, continue. Sorry, I cut you off.
No, I was gonna say, I really don't get people who are like, the prequels are bad. I feel like those are just like old dudes who saw the original movies when they came out, and they're like, anything that deviates from what I expected is bad. Because they were really good.
It's also them being unable to grapple.
Story that worked really well. They raised a lot of interesting points. George Lucas is just bad at writing dialogue. That's really it.
That's very true. Like, going back to some of that Hayden Christensen, Anakin Skywalker dialogue, you're like, ooh, boy, Padme, listen, you gotta get out of here.
To act really wooden.
Yeah, I mean, Hayden Christensen is not a great actor, but that dialogue, it does no one any favors. Like, there's also an interesting bit regarding The Phantom Menace. is they show the casting for young Anakin, and who it ends up being Jake Lloyd, and they pick Jake Lloyd because like, oh, he feels so much more childlike than these other child actors. He's more like a kid, but he's not like great at acting. Like you see in that documentary, there's like another kid who does the terrible, oh, you look like an angel line, but he actually kind of almost sells you on it. That's how like good this kid is. You're like, wow, actually, he made that terrible line seem good.
Yeah.
And then they fast forward to like when they're on set with Jake Lloyd, and they're like, the guys in the background are like, oh, he's not doing it. It's like, well, you hired him, you picked him for this role. Now you're surprised that he's not that great at acting when you simply picked him because he looked precocious. Like, come on, guys, what are you doing? You did this.
Yeah. But isn't that the joy of filmmaking, though? And watching?
Yeah, I guess.
So good. I mean, not to continue tooting the blank check horn, but like that's what I really appreciate about that. Because like I'm fine with people saying like, oh, I think the prequels are bad, which is because I'm fine with that thing. But the problem is that a lot of people don't want to like accept the idea that like every piece of media and art has nuance to it, in which there are good and positive and negatives to almost all aspects.
Mm-hmm.
Also, they have this idea of Star Wars as a franchise, and they just like, listen, hey,
exactly.
Star Wars is for kids.
Yeah.
It always was. You can still enjoy it as an adult, but it's not made specifically for you.
Yeah.
And you're going to have to get over that, or, you
like
just be angry on the internet all the time, which is obviously a great way to live your life.
Yeah, the classic Patrick H. Willems bit where he basically says that, where he's like, guys, you guys got to calm down, okay? I don't know if you know this, but George Lucas, when he made Star Wars, he didn't make it for you. I don't know if you know this. George Lucas is old. He got kids. He made prequels for his kids. I don't know if you guys remember this part.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And like
just like the proof, the proof is in the pudding. I think I might have brought this up like between Thanksgiving and Christmas, but like my cousins just saw that the original, like all the Star Wars movies were on Disney Plus. They watched the original trilogy and then they were hooked, and then they just plowed through the prequel trilogy and through the sequel trilogy. And I think they're like gonna start watching like either the Clone Wars or the Mandalorian now, and like they fucking love that shit. Like it's
cool.
Yeah, Star Wars cool.
I mean, that's the other thing that aggravates me is that like one bad thing will happen and they're like, Star Wars is done. It's over. There's no more Star Wars, and I'm like, dog. There's so much Star Wars out there. Like,
man, you just gotta let go at some point and just say, hey, it's not for me. Whatever, I don't have to watch. Like I had that negative attitude because like when like the whole Clone Wars, like they had the movie and the TV show, I was like, what are this dumb Clone Wars for kids shit? And then then I realized, oh wait, this is actually kind of like a cool like military sci-fi show that's actually very, very much for me.
Right, yeah.
And I just dismissed it because I'm like, oh, this looks dumb. Who's this Asako Tano lady? I don't care about her. What? Now it's like.
Dude, now that you brought up, I do have to recommend a classic YouTube video, which is Star Wars: The Clone Wars is a kid show, I swear. Which is a compilation video of going through every goddamn gruesome death they have in that show. Where like I remember being in high school and I'm sitting there watching season 1, and they got the Rishi base episode where they have the clones and they're defending Rishi base from the droids who attack it, and you're like, yo, dude, what the fuck? That guy got eaten by a giant worm.
Yeah, there was the episode where they did a really good job in that show of like making General Grievous like actually intimidating sometimes. Like there was
instead of a guy with asthma.
Right. Yeah. There was the episode.
Well, he still got asthma in the show, but like.
They had a whole episode where it was like a dude and I think it was Kit Fisto and his Padawan. And they were tracking down General Grievous, and they got to like one of his secret bases or whatever, and it turned into this like really weird claustrophobic horror setting where like it was these dark corridors that he was sort of climbing around with his spider appendages, and it was super creepy. And then he kills the fucking Padawan at the end. It's just like Jesus.
Just fucking ice.
Yash has been like trying for the last 3 or 4 years to get me to watch Clone Wars. He almost succeeded this year, but he sent me a list like that someone made of the episodes you should watch.
Episode lists. Yeah.
And I watched like 4 episodes and I got to the Clone Wars and I was like, I can't do this. I don't have the energy to like hit the backspace button and go hunting through each season to find these specific episodes.
Just watch it. Watch it in release order. That's my recommendation for everything. Just watch it in release order.
But on the topic of like really gruesome deaths, I was watching a couple of episodes with some friends last night just because that's what they'd been watching. I didn't really care. And it was like, I think it was like right at the end of season 3 when things actually start going in chronological order continuously. And they're like trying to escape from a base or something. And start climbing up like an elevator shaft or something. And one of the clones, like all the doors start slamming shut. And then a door slams shut in front of the camera, and then you just hear a clone getting sliced in half, and I was like, Jesus!
Yeah.
Rough. The end of season 1 is a terrorism episode where a bunch of mercenaries take the Senate hostage.
Oh yeah.
And you're like, what the fuck's happening?
Wow.
That's when they have one of their first, like, I mean, Ahsoka's there from the beginning, but like Cad Bane, I think, was introduced.
Yes, that is the introduction episode of one of my favorite Star Wars characters of all time, Cad fucking Bane.
Yeah.
Where it was one of those episodes where I was like, all right, season 1's pretty fine, and then they introduced Cad Bane, and I'm like, this guy fucking slaps. Yeah. He's got the hat. He's got the voice. He fucking rules.
He's got the hat and the voice. That's what you need.
I feel like Dave Filoni was just like, all right, everybody loves Boba Fett, but he's not here yet. He's a child right now. I mean, he is in the show at some points, but he's obviously still a kid at that point. And everybody loves what they did with him in the extended universe. So, like, let's just make another bounty hunter that's really fucking cruel and merciless and dope as hell at the same time. And then they made Cad Bane. And it was super fucking dope. Anyways, we spent the last 20 minutes talking about Star Wars. I don't know how this keeps happening. We were talking about podcasts, and then we got
can I make one more Star Wars note?
Okay, yes.
Because my actual favorite character is Hondo Ohnaka, who's a pirate introduced in like season 3, and he's just he's peak like smuggler territory.
Oh, is he the dude with the spikes on his face and the little
he's
monkey?
got the spikes on his face.
Yeah.
And like their entire episodes, like I think in the very first episode he's in, he switches sides like 5 times, and you're like, dude, this guy slaps.
Yeah, he's a fucking dope ass pirate, and he's like, he develops, like his character develops over.
Yeah, he's an actual character. Like he's a 1-bit joke character in the first episode, and then like by the end you're like, damn, dude, I can't believe how much Hondo's changed.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Anyways, I guess we just fucking love Star Wars. We can't stop talking about it.
To answer your question, Nick, what happened was at the beginning you were like, well, so much shit happened this week. That's clearly all we're going to be talking about.
Yeah,
but
and then we spend more than half the episode.
Spotify Wrapped for 5 minutes. Then we talked about Dungeons and Dragons for 15 minutes, and then we talked about Star Wars for 15 minutes.
It's great how these things can spiral. I really like. I've just noticed, like, I've been going through the backlogs. We talk about Star Wars on this show a lot. I need to make a second
it's like
show
the Force, the thing that binds us all together.
Yeah. Yeah.
Or it just means we're all very uninteresting people.
Yeah, we're
That's
all just
also possibly true.
Slaves to this one piece of media. We're no better than the fucking guys who shit on all the new movies. I do think though that maybe we should address the other big thing that we thought we would.
The elephant in the room.
Yes, the very large, gigantic, capital breach-shaped elephant in the room.
I picked a hell of a time to reinstall Twitter. That's all I can say.
Yeah.
Why would you do that?
Yes.
Why would you do that?
Because I was like, I uninstalled it over the summer because I was like, I'm looking at this too much, and I don't like feeling like a slave to anything. So I deleted it off my phone, and then I thought about reinstalling it around the time of the election, then I was like, no, that's a bad idea. That's going to be really bad. And then, like, the week of Christmas, I think I was like, well, I'm done with all my classes for the semester. I have a break now. Everything's just kind of calmed down. It's going to be fine.
Nope.
It is helpful considering I don't have cable TV, so that was how I was able to keep track of what was happening and watch like live broadcasts.
Yeah.
If you need social media, just get a Tumblr. That's all I'm saying. It's way less cursed than Twitter.
Bring it back.
Why would you say
this? Bring back Tumblr. All right. That's all I'm saying. I send you some fucking funny memes on Tumblr, Beekman. All right. Don't.
You have an interesting definition of the word funny, but I digress.
Did you not like the Yoda meme where he was talking about?
And Nick and I will be the only people on Tumblr.
I don't know. Somehow it's still kicking. It's incredible. Let me just give a quick rundown for like probably the 0 people that aren't in the know on what the fuck is
It's for the international audience.
For the last week. Here's what you missed on Glee.
So 2021 started on January 1st, which was last fucking Friday.
It was last Friday.
Yep. And we got 6 days into it, and on Wednesday the 6th, some fucking Proud Boys decided to raid the Capitol, as that was the day that the Electoral College votes were being certified by Vice President Pence in the Senate.
In the Senate chambers, yes.
Yeah. So some Proud Boys were like, hey, this election's a fraud, so we're just going to just head on over and just raid the Capitol building.
I should say it's not exclusively the Proud Boys. It was a bunch of people who you could call under the tent of people who support Donald Trump and people who believed the election was fraudulent, manipulated, or stolen, whatever terminology you want to use in some way. So they were protesting, as you know, they're allowed to do that. They're allowed to go to DC and protest. However, that accelerated when they overcame the barricades around the Capitol building and forced their way inside. A number of people have died. Most notably in the news, a former Air Force senior airman, Ashley Babbitt, who was shot reportedly by a Secret Service agent inside the Capitol building near the Senate chambers. Apparently, as far as I understand, the reason Secret Service was in that particular hallway was way down. I mean, far away, but down that same hallway, long hallway. Apparently, they were still moving Vice President Pence to a vehicle to get him to leave the premises. But a Capitol policeman died later after he was bashed. He was brained in the head with a fire extinguisher during a scuffle. You know, he later died. A number of people were trampled, other injuries.
I think one of them got trampled to death, if that's correct.
Yeah.
One of them got trampled to death wearing a shirt that said "Don't tread on me." Another guy had a heart attack after accidentally tasing himself in the nuts.
Is that true? I saw.
I've not heard. I've not seen confirmation on that. I didn't want to say that one because obviously that it is been going around because it is a very funny scenario. But I've not seen.
I don't know if that's been verified, but there's been multiple deaths from I think all of them except for there was like that one police guard that was killed, but pretty much everybody.
Yeah, he was in critical condition and then he later passed away at a hospital. So yeah, that's pretty unprecedented in a lot of ways in American history.
Pretty fucking wild.
In terms of the Confederate flag inside the U.S. Capitol, which has never happened in the history of the United States, and it was a pretty and then of course the aftermath with the President Trump, and clearly he played a role in inciting the crowd.
The proceeding of it was like him saying all this inciting shit, which is just like, I don't know how anybody can be like, nah, he didn't mean that. He was just goofing and gaffing, guys. He didn't really.
Well, I don't know. I'd like to point you to the evidence of people doing that for the last 5 years. So like,
there's been different video footage that seems to suggest that in a lot of areas, the Capitol Police, who are forming a barricade around the building, just kind of like closed the barricade.
So I've got like an AP article up right now, and the way it starts, like, the deadly siege focuses attention on Capitol Police. The first line is that only a few dozen guarded the west front of the U.S. Capitol when they were rushed by thousands of pro-Trump
there's been a lot of recriminations about the preparation of the various law enforcement and security agencies in the capital region.
And there had been
the Capitol Police
knowledge beforehand that there was going to be a very large rally of pro-Trump supporters
Yeah.
in the area on the 6th. So it really
and
raises
in fact,
the
I
question...
mean that shit has rolled downhill because the chief of the Capitol Police resigned. Both Sergeant at Arms for the House of Representatives and the Senate have both resigned. Because they're wearing it. But yeah, I mean, obviously the situation was like could be avoided. There's been talk about the Pentagon who said who had initially deployed 340 National Guardsmen from the DC Guard to support, but they were in a sort of kind of very much support capacity, not to be interacting because of the negative image that came out of the various protests in the Capitol after the death of George Floyd. There's the iconic image of all the National Guardsmen lined up on the steps of the Lincoln Memorial,
which then backfired because now everybody's saying like, look how much they prepared for people fighting against police brutality versus how much they prepared for a bunch of
and people making suggestions that had it been the same group again from the summer, then they would have had no issue with a more aggressive approach to dealing with the protesters on Wednesday.
Yeah, and I mean, we'll never know for sure, but I have a strong feeling that would have been the case, which is really sad. The fact that they didn't. It just seems like at the very least they didn't take the threat seriously, which led to them getting into the Capitol at all.
Well, I would say it's more than that. There's a very good clip of someone who I do not agree with on most things, which is of Joe Scarborough. But because it is Joe Scarborough and he's been into DC about as much as I have, in that we have both lived in and around the area of District of Columbia, we both had very similar reactions of like, this is not. They underestimated the threat. This is someone somewhere screwed up, either intentionally or unintentionally, very hard. Because if you walk around DC, even on a day without big protests, Capitol Police will be like, "Hey, you want to back up a little bit?"
Yeah, and it's clear that they were understaffed. Undermanned for the size of the crowd they were dealing with, which probably caused. I mean, there's been that specific video clip of what people surmise is cops just opening the barricades, but there is a potentially legitimate reason, because if you're holding a barricade and you realize, we can't hold these barricades, at a certain point you may make the decision to avoid a scuffle or a confrontation, but obviously that can only go so far, and then now they're in the building, and
plus it didn't appear like they were falling back, like trying to move the barricade backwards so they could kind of encircle a bit closer to the building. It just kind of looked like they let everyone in.
So I'm sure there'll be more inquiry and investigation on what's going on, and I think one thing to keep in mind about all this is like, obviously, there's a crowd of people, and without knowing the exact political views on everything of everyone in this Discord call, I can safely say that we probably none of us here really agreed with the reason why these people showed up to protest today.
I think that would be safe to say.
I think there's been a lot of people calling for like a really like hardline, like they want the knee-jerk, the collective punishment, and it's like, well, I mean, you got to look at these people in certain ways. Like, obviously, there's a police officer who's dead. That person's someone's gonna probably have to, answer for that, because you didn't mean to brain him with a fire extinguisher, but you did, and he died. So that's manslaughter, and you did it on federal property, which leads to some more complicated scenarios with all of this. But I'm sure there were people here in this crowd of people who obviously had some probably bad intentions. Like, we've all seen the photo of the dude who's in all black. He's got the punished skull up front. He's got zip cuffs, and he's got like a holstered
with like the fucking bear
gun.
Bear pelt or whatever it is, like on his fucking head.
The QAnon shaman, as he is known in the internet sphere.
The most horrifying thing I think to come out of this protest is not like even any of the property damage. It's the number of people I've seen on Twitter who have just found screenshots of that one guy and described in graphic detail what things they wanted to do to him sexually.
Oh.
Even
that's unfortunate.
Why?
Wow.
I thankfully not come across that, but
time. Pick anyone else.
Jesus fucking Christ. Yikes. That's a bad look. Certifiably.
The worst part is there was one guy who posted like a screenshot and made some sort of commentary about like, what I would do to him. And somebody replied to it, like, are you aware of what he did? Are you aware this guy's like a huge racist? And the guy replies, I can fix him.
Oh no.
That is the most terrifying thing of all.
Oh no.
I can
honey,
fix
no.
him.
I know I made
Standards are on the ground, and yet some people come with shovels prepared to dig.
I've heard it all social media. I've had it.
Yeah.
It's
I think we should go back to no social media. I think we should just delete it all.
I think we should go back to cave drawings. I mean, like, really, what drama do we have to deal with then?
Better in the day when you're an internet forum, and it was like there are 50 people on the internet forum, so if you were getting out of line, if you were talking spicy, someone would be like, no, dude, stop it. We're all going to make fun of you because you're being a dumbass.
Yeah.
Well, that's just my early internet experience. But, so like, obviously there are people here who like, probably had some pretty bad fucking intentions. By the way they came, the stuff they brought. But there's other people like who they were just part of this crowd, and then suddenly like, oh, we're going into the Capitol building, and not saying those people are free from consequences for their actions, but like you can, there has to be, some nuance here with the justice system. Like
you can both think that what they did was wrong and they deserve some form of punishment, and also be like, wow, the justice system in this country is still kind of whack.
Right, yeah. And that was an interesting like dilemma that's been brought up because of this, because it's like, yeah, these guys should be punished, but like also we still hate the the fucking fucked up police system that we have right now. So like, how do you reconcile that?
So there's been talk about like,
it was kind of funny to see how many people a decent amount of their platform was like supporting the police, and that's something that we saw a lot over the summer. And it's funny to see now in coverage from like some protests that I saw Tuesday night and on Wednesday that were like, now they're also saying fuck the police.
Curious.
And yeah, well, just also
maybe it wasn't about the police.
There's been discussion about like possibly new anti-domestic terrorism laws. I'm like, well, domestic terrorism is kind of already illegal in the United States. Like,
yeah,
and just like I urge caution, because like 9/11, we're still living in the after effects of September 11th in the sort of stuff that felt right at the time, and we need to do this.
Yeah.
And then now it's like, oh, we got the Patriot Act, and a bunch of other decisions that were not necessarily thought through for the long-term consequences and how they could be applied to people other than the people you don't like. And I will say, for anyone listening, I don't agree with these people, and I think what they did was wrong. But like, you can easily imagine a scenario where these stringent new guidelines get passed, these stringent new laws, and they get applied to,
like if they're
Black Lives Matter protests,
another
minority group or marginalized
group. Like, hope it never happens. But if they like end up knee jerking so hard when Joe gets in that they end up passing like a second Patriot Act or something like that, like a Patriot Act 2, you could just as easily, they're almost like certainly going to make it, because it has to be general enough that
and a sort of ironic example of this is that House, like the law that Donald Trump got passed when they were like, people were like defacing Confederate monuments and destroying it, like this like protect monuments law. Some of the people who were here will be prosecuted more than they would have because that law exists. And it's just like,
kind of crazy.
Here you go. Here's the example. The law of unintended outcomes here. So
falling on your own sword.
Karma do be a bitch.
But it is certainly a sort of shocking in the moment thing to see. I mean, maybe not surprising, given what's been happening.
Yeah, I mean,
past years, and maybe not surprising depending on what your understanding or what your viewpoint on American history is.
Yeah, I think that was the thing. Is I feel like I had a lot of people, like, as someone who lives in and around DC, like a lot of people were like, "Yo, can you believe this happened?" And I was like, "I mean, yeah, kinda. Like, have you been paying attention to the?" There was the meme going around, which is like, well, that escalated
quickly,
gradually
over a period of 4 or 5 years.
Here. Yeah.
Well, I'm talking about even before Donald Trump was in office. Like,
Well, that's the other thing. Like, I would have. Sorry for cutting you off, Beekman, but you just. Yeah. So you continue, and then I'll jump in with my thing.
Going back, like century or more about the history of like sort of mob violence in America and like angry, like stuff like the bombing of Tulsa, Oklahoma in the early 1900s, where white racists attacked black neighborhoods in Tulsa, killed a bunch of people, never got charged. But like, I didn't know about that incident until the show Watchmen came out, and that's depicted in the opening of Watchmen, the TV show on HBO, is the Tulsa. And I was like, wait, what? And I like looked this up, and I'm like, oh my god! Like I'd never learned about this, obviously, because I'm the American sort of psyche when it comes to certain historical events. It's perhaps slanted towards a certain perspective.
Not something they usually cover in history class for one reason.
Well, not even history class, but just like in general, and there's sort of the general zeitgeist and the general sort of collective understanding of American history.
What were you gonna say, Jacob?
Yeah. What?
Sorry, I got distracted with going back through because I took American Slavery and Freedom in back at RIT as one of my last classes, and like the thing they leave you off on, at least my professor left us off on with that class, is like that class basically ends with the Reconstruction period and then the end of Reconstruction, and it's basically like this shit of like what you just explained, like, hey guys, I don't know if you guys remember, but like there was a very short period of time where things were okay. It was called Reconstruction, and we were trying to right the wrongs of our past. And then a bunch of fucking white people from the South and Andrew Johnson fucked everything up. White racists in the South would like just not deem elections legitimate.
Yeah.
It's the same shit as what's happening right now. They would say, sorry, we don't, even though that guy was democratically elected, we don't see him as the rightful leader of our state, county, parish, etc. And we will literally kill anyone who disagrees with us.
Yeah. And it's I don't know, man. It's fucking crazy.
Oh, the instance I'm just reminded about is called the Colfax Massacre, which is about a parish known as Colfax, in which there was basically a disputed election at a higher level, and that election, the person who's in charge determines who's in charge of the parish. And so basically, the democratically elected, people in charge were supported by the African Americans of Colfax.
Yes.
And a bunch of white racists literally stormed the like murdered a bunch of people around town. And then when they were like, oh shit, they're gonna fucking come for us, the people of Colfax all went to I think it's either like the local, like it's basically like one of the local town spots or whatever, where business is conducted. Town square, basically held up there, and like everyone fucking died because all these white people showed up and murdered the shit out of them.
It's like you have this, and I don't want to say like it's people generally, I don't want to assume, are ignorant enough to believe that after the Civil War, slave racism is no more. We have canceled slavery.
That, but like,
but that's the thing. Like, it literally, it's still happening. Like the repercussions and like the healing that is required from hundreds of years of institutionalized slavery is still having ramifications in the current year. Like immediately after the Civil War, you had Reconstruction, where obviously everybody who lost the war is like, man, fuck this shit. I hate this. I hate you. I still want to hate black people. Wah, wah, wah. And they try to, like, do all this fucking, like what you're talking about, where they just don't recognize the people that were elected, because turns out when you have such a fucking massive slave population that you need to make a 3/5 clause so you can get more representation in Congress, when all those slaves are freed, they're going to be able to vote for a lot of people that you wouldn't like because, surprise, surprise, they're not fucking racists. And, like, so they just didn't want to deal with that.
Yeah.
And then, you know, that got dragged into the 1900s.
Well, it's also the sort of mythology of the Civil War about the South, the Lost Cause myth, and sort of, you know...
The Daughters of the Confederacy were very effective at what they want to do, which was propagate lies about what happened during the Civil War.
It's about heritage, not hate. You know, the states' rights argument, ignoring the fact that, like, all but one of the states have seceded from the Union, and their messages about why they were seceding mention slavery by name as the primary concern.
Oopsies!
I watched Gone with the Wind for the first time ever earlier in quarantine, and one thing that struck me was that it was interesting to show just how much it sucks to be on the losing side of a war and dealing with, like, the aftermath, particularly when the fighting is being done on, like, your home turf.
Yeah.
And also, it was interesting to kind of note, like, how much everyone in the movie kind of just brushes over the entire idea about, like, slavery and that being involved in
even though they're, like, slave characters in that movie, and you're just like...
And it was interesting because I'm sure, like, definitely when the book was written and when the movie came out, the reason they were doing that was for completely different reasons than it would be now. It was definitely because they were like, who cares? And they wanted to kind of brush over anything
romantic, like...
Yeah, it was definitely a very romanticized picture of the South. But I would say watching that from the current era, it was very interesting to watch because that is the mindset that a lot of these people have.
Yeah.
And it's a very, very idealized picture of how things used to be and it being better, but it really wasn't. It was just like the after effects of the Civil War were so terrible that they were like...
Yeah. Like, carpetbagging, sure, was a real issue, but, like, you literally... It was still... Like, even when slavery existed in the South, like, it was pretty much still only the aristocracy that could even own slaves. So poor white people were still very poor. It's just that, like, they were, because of the societal, like, standards, they had some inherent, like, better value than black slaves just because they weren't slaves. And it's just, like, because of that reason, people just were like, oh, no, it was just better for everyone down there. We just gloss over the whole slavery part of it, which is extremely flawed.
The main character around the halfway point in the movie has now, like, she came from a wealthy family, and now the Civil War's over. They lost. All their slaves are gone now, except for, like, a couple of, like a housekeeper and a couple other people who are very curiously sticking around in a way that I don't think a lot of them would have.
See you later, sister. I'm out.
Yeah. We just love you so much. I grew up with you. I might as well.
Man, I just love being indentured so much. Of course.
But it was interesting because the main character on the halfway point of the movie is like, we have, like, all of my family is dead, basically. I'm the oldest person left, and I have to take care of, like, my younger siblings and everything. It's up to me. And she starts, like, taking charge of, like, the farming herself and, like, working out in the fields and things. And then she starts doing some other stuff, including, like, manipulating men and marrying them in order to get money and kind of start businesses in a way that whatever. It was actually kind of cool. She's a cool character. But it was interesting to see, like, she's working out in the fields and she's doing all these things that she used to have enslaved people doing. And like a lot of people, instead of going, maybe this was, like, a really shitty thing.
Maybe I'm the bad guy.
Yeah, they very...
Or maybe I'm the bad guy. A lot of people in that time period were like, you know what? This is black people's fault.
Yeah.
Things were better when I didn't have to think about the consequences of my actions.
and that's where you get the stuff about like the war of northern aggression and like the sort of like they want to place the sort of essentially sort of like the victimhood of like oh we were just victimized by the strong North. We just wanted to live by our principles and our ideals,
which
and
included
our
owning
idyllic,
slaves, but
which and like, and it's funny because like all the things they try and throw at like like because people ignore the fact. I think it goes understated that some people don't realize like Abraham Lincoln was not intending to like ban slavery as soon as he got into office. He simply said, "Hey, you can't expand slavery to other parts of the United States that get created, new states, because this is sort of the beginning of the American westward expansion, manifest destiny, yada yada yada. Your 8th grade history class." But but they hated that so much because there's like whoa, any restrictions on whoa, and like Abraham Lincoln
like
himself was not a particularly radical abolitionist in a sense because like he held some pretty racist ideals. He did not believe white people and black people were equal necessarily. His view was that we can't let this institution of slavery exist because black people are human beings, and if we can own black people as slaves, that means we can own any human being as slaves, and I don't want any like
right,
that implies that white, no, we can't have that.
Yeah.
That was his sort of value system around it.
Yeah, it's literally a friction that started before the country was even founded, and basically it was for it once again for horrific and wrong reasons. Basically, like, yeah, that's a problem. Let's not deal with that right now.
Kick on that can down the road.
And it's funny, famously Alexis de Tocqueville, the Frenchman who visited the United States and wrote his famous book about it in the early 19th century. That was what he identified. He's like, the problem of slavery is going to be a problem, and then it's going to result in violence in the United States. And he was right, because it was this thing that just kept getting kicked down the road for like resolving the issue, and like it just eventually got to a loggerheads where it's like,
because nobody, like, when you're founding the country, you're barely, like, the founding fathers were barely hanging in there fighting against the fucking British, so they were just like, dude, we can't tackle, like, Benjamin Franklin called for complete, like, abolition of slavery, and people were, and, like, the people in office.
Well, they just wanted to find a way to hold the country together at the time, and instead of like, we have just fought this war to throw off our colonial masters.
Yeah.
And now we have to. Now it's like, well, our country's still very new to the idea of being a country, and like, what do we do to like glue all these disparate parts together? Well, we do the 3/5 compromise by saying, listen, okay, we'll let you. So you get the people to agree to.
So yeah, like you said, it was pretty much inevitable from the point where the country was founded that was going to lead to another war, and I mean, again, like we were saying after the fact, like the resolution of it still was so flawed that the repercussions of it we're still dealing with it today, and I pray to God that we can not devolve into any more extreme large-scale violence.
Yeah, well, it's going to be, it's...
Well, I mean, I think what's crazy is, like, I feel like a lot of people out there I understand that this is something that can just be fixed, but, like, there are a lot of people out there who are like, oh, yeah, the Civil War, that's when we solved that problem.
Right.
And slavery And then moving on, that they were like, oh yeah, the 60s. That's when the civil rights thing happened. That's when we like did the civil rights thing.
Is no more.
And it's like, this time. No, dude, did you not like learn about stuff like Bleeding Kansas and like John Brown and like all of the shit that happened between the founding of the country and then the Civil War, and then after the Civil War, all the shit that happened between the Civil War and the Civil Rights Movement?
Yeah, there's a film coming out about a movie about a bunch of it's set during the First World War, and it's about a bunch of black soldiers who are down like Texas and like essentially get into a shootout with Texas locals because they're like black soldiers, they're in uniform in the military, and like they're not being treated with, like, they're being harassed and harangued and treated poorly by the Texas locals, who probably don't take too kindly to black people who are trained soldiers in arms. Like that probably doesn't sit well with their racist ideals. So, and like, yeah, that stuff happened like well after the Civil War. Like, just shit, like I said, the bombing of Tulsa, that happened in the 20th century. Like that, they used airplanes. The airplane had invented, and white people used private airplanes so they got access to bomb neighborhoods.
Yeah.
It just
and again,
people
it's
that when you tell that to people, they're just absolutely blown away.
Speaking of explosives, one thing that I'm very concerned about going forward in the near future is like people have planted explosives in the Capitol building and some other areas.
Yeah,
also
there have been reports of mysterious packages in different places.
Yeah, and I feel like that's not getting a ton of coverage, at least compared to everything else. And that's something that I think we ought to be concerned about. And also, I remember watching the show Designated Survivor, which went off the air like a year or two ago, and that has made me increasingly anxious about Inauguration Day.
Like, maybe I have too much of a nonchalant attitude about some of this, but like there's an aspect to all this where, and it could also just be that I like I have said a couple times now, I live in and around DC, so like I don't know, there's an aspect of like, yeah, it could get that bad, but like it's not so far out of the norm where I'm like, I'm both prepared for it to happen and also like, you know what, there's only so much I myself, an individual, can do in order to stop something like that from happening. And as far as I've seen, I've done as much as I physically can do. The best thing I can do right now is like not interfere with stopping any.
Yeah, it's like flying, even if you're afraid of planes. Like at that point, if the plane crashes, there's not anything that you can do about it as a passenger. So you might as well just kind of accept that whatever's going to happen is going to happen.
Yeah,
that's actually a
really to object to that claim. I will get in the cockpit and I will fly that plane to safety personally. So.
Yeah, I just realized you're out your pilot license. Congratulations.
I mean, all the sort of pipe bomb stuff and that, and sort of, I mean, because like this was largely not planned. This was sort of a spontaneous event that happened as a result of just the, what happens with large disorganized crowds. Things just snowball.
Yeah.
But it is worrying because like there's some commentary from people. Stop me if you heard this before, but I'm a white guy.
What?
Who's into military history and stuff.
Bro.
Totally original. Never been done before.
Really a trendsetter, truly.
Really a trendsetter. But commentators about like what if this had been like a more like some people brought up the Mumbai attacks in 2008, which were more organized, like 12 dudes who were equipped, and just more committed and like organizationally motivated. Like they could have done some as Nicole points out, like the whole Designated Survivor Center, like done some absolutely unprecedented and catastrophic damage to the government of the the legislative branch of the United States and the executive branch of the United States. Like,
yeah, I agree. Exactly. But I think also like the best thing we can do is like bang pots and pans and be like, call people who have actual jurisdiction to make them change and be like, hey, next time when these guys are not, real bad at doing a coup attempt, can you guys be more on the ball that time so that it doesn't get any worse than what happened this time around?
A lot of people who are like, oh, it's actually an auto golpe, a self coup. It's like, all right, okay, I know you found out about that word this week.
Yeah.
Slow your roll.
Yeah. We're way over on time, so I think we've all said our piece on it, but definitely would love to stop
hoping for better days.
Yeah, hoping for better days. Would love to stop living through significant events in U.S. history.
It happens from time to time.
Yeah.
May you live in interesting times.
Yes. The Chinese proverb. Yes. May you live in interesting times.
Yeah. The let's hope that by next week there is no more news as Buck Wild or more Buck Wild than this to talk about.
I'm still waiting for the World War III arc to get picked back up from last year.
Yeah, bring it back. It's just in time. January.
Right. Anyways, thank you guys for watching.
Back in your mouth, please.
Thank you for watching Horsing Around, Dumbass Cast. I'm going to be coming back online a little bit to be starting up a Pokemon Soul Lock run with my boy Kyle. So come back here around 6 for that. And until then, thanks for watching. Stay safe, dear God, and peace out. Stop the stream.